of all knowing, all powerful, ever present. We bow before thee this morning, and our hearts are filled with wonder and awe and reverence, as well as thanksgiving. We're grateful, Father, for everyone who's gathered here this day. We're thankful for those back with us that have been away from us. We're mindful also, Father, of those of our number who are not able to be here, and those who may be traveling or separated from us due to illness or the threat of illness. We do pray your richest blessing would be upon them as well. We realize, Father, there are those who are suffering under the virus and other illnesses, ailments that come with old age, other circumstances. We do pray, Father, that you would bless us with the wisdom and the opportunities to be a help to one another in a way that is helpful. We realize, Father, every day more and more how we live in a land of frailty, a land of dying. We do pray that you would please help us to be people who find contentment with the shortcomings and the limitations of this life as we look for a better place in which there will be no more pain or suffering. But while we're here, Father, help us to be an instrument in thy hands. We pray that we might be able to be a light, and that we might be able to be a blessing and a help in thy name to those around us, not only to our brethren, but those in the world, Father, who look for hope and who desperately need the message of salvation that means so much to all of us. We pray particularly, Father, that you would help us at this hour. Help us to open thy word this day and to make the most of our time. Help us, Father, to be able to draw closer to thee by learning more of thy revealed will. Bless us to that end, and bless us in the worship hour to come. Forgive us, accept our thanks. Help us, Father, to be blessed with the wisdom and the strength that we need for the challenges that we may face this day and in the days to come. We ask in Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. We'll do something with this.
So just turn it on. Hey Wes,
All right, yeah.
just turn it on. We can turn it back on. Are you gonna use it?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. I say just turn it off.
Okay, well, so much for you. All right, we're in chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes. And, what we find in chapter 10 are a series of proverbs. But I don't believe these are just randomized thoughts. I think that the context of this passage has to do with the statement made over in chapter 9 as we divide the book. When Solomon said, I returned and saw under the sun, verse 11 of chapter 9, that I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happeneth to them all. For man also knoweth not his time, as the fishes are taken in an evil net, and as the birds are caught in the snare, so are the sons of men snared in the evil time, when it falleth suddenly upon them. Now there is a way in which people look at life, and by the way, that all sounds very familiar to many of us, because we hear that kind of talk quite a bit. That people believe in fate. They believe that we just, man's blessed or he's cursed, but there's not much he can do about it. The universe just has a plan for you, or it doesn't have a plan for you. And so I'm just not lucky. Some people are so lucky and I'm not lucky. And this is the kind of thing that people are saying. And Solomon is not here, I think, trying to suggest to us that life is so simple that you input this, you get this back, or that every person gets what they deserve in this life. But what he is saying is that if you think that luck and time and chance are the dominant forces in the world, he said, you're wrong about that. He said, I'll tell you something that matters a whole lot more, and it is the choice that we make to be wise or foolish. That has a lot more impact on our life than just time and chance. And to that point, he tells a story here at the end of chapter 9 that has a lot to do with choices. Chapter 10, dead flies, he begins there, cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly to him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. This fellow's not unlucky. He made a choice, and his choice was that he wanted to choose a shortcut, folly. And you pay a price for that. And as I think we said last time, maybe I'm not much into perfume making, but we may like to eat. Maybe that's more readily mindful for us. And so it doesn't take very many flies in your soup before you decide, well, maybe I just need to eat something else. It doesn't take very much. It doesn't take a lot of folly to ruin, to mar. And so he says, you want to look somewhere for the answers of why things are the way they are. See if you haven't made the moral shortcuts that lead to problems. He said in verse 2, the wise man's heart's at his right hand, the fool's at his left. And again, right and left are common figures for the idea of good and evil. And he said, I'll tell you something that matters a lot more toward the outcome of your life is where your heart is. And if you got your heart set on doing the right thing, we look back on some events of our lives. We might say, boy, it just didn't work out very well, and I don't know why. Did I not really know why? Well, sometimes they're just things that do happen. People get sick. We don't know why things happen. We regret things. But I'll tell you, sometimes in my life, I can look back at situations that didn't work out well, and I can say, really? I had something on my mind in that situation besides what was right. My heart wasn't really fully committed to what was right. I was thinking about other things and just sort of hoping that stuff would work out. And that's probably a lot of reasons why things happened the way they did. Quit blaming time and chance, Solomon says to me. And start thinking about what you do or don't do in reference to wisdom, in reference to godliness. And then he talks in verse 3. I can't remember if we got this one in last time or not. But yea, also, when he that is a fool walks by the way, his wisdom faileth him. And he saith to everyone that he's a fool. You can't just tell by looking at a guy sometimes. He looks like a, normal fellow. He thought maybe he had good sense. But it won't take long before the things that he says, whether they be vulgar things or whether they be risque or whether they be slanderous or just crude, whatever it might be. And pretty soon you realize, this guy looked like a normal fellow, but actually he's really a lot less than what he ought to be. And so we're betrayed by what's on the inside. That counts for a whole lot more than time and chance. I think he picks up on that theme later on in the chapter. Look at verse 12 with me, Ecclesiastes 10. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool will swallow up himself. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is mischievous madness. He goes from bad to worse. Because he is a fool and he doesn't have enough sense just to be quiet. What was it the Proverbs told us? Even a fool, if he holdeth his peace, is counted wise. But this fellow just can't stand to be silent. He's got to speak and let everybody know how foolish he is. In fact, verse 14 says, a fool is full of words, and a man cannot tell what you'll be, and what you'll be after him. Who can tell him? He doesn't know the answer, but he's full of words. Does that ever describe you and me? You suppose there have been times when we've been full of words and we should have been just quiet. Verse 15 is tough. He says, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. There's an old expression folks used to use out in the country, that boy doesn't know the way to town. Or my dad, I think that was the same thing. He used to use an expression, I never did ask him what it meant, but I got the gist of it. He said, that boy doesn't have big road sense. Well, that's it. He doesn't have enough sense to follow the big road to town. Well, that might have a lot more to do with shaping our life than bad luck. And there are a lot of things I might excuse for just time and chance. I don't know. I can't imagine what happened. Just like a fish. Some of you guys have been fishing, you relate to this. Just like a fish. Just snatched down. Probably not. Probably if I'm more discerning, I'll realize that I had something to do with that mess. The choices that I made, the words that I used, the things that were in my heart. So I don't think the point is chapter 10 is just a random group of sayings. I think chapter 10 really just gets me where I live. And it causes me to look at myself and examine myself and quit making excuses and start taking responsibility for me. And I think that's a needed lesson in the world in which we live. Our world is full of excuses. Full of excuses. Not my fault. Life's not fair. I think some of the great, not to be political, but some of the great heroes of our history are people who come from the lowest circumstances and just refused to be anything but all they could be. Well, they had every opportunity to turn aside. I've told you before, I think one of the great Americans that ever lived was a fellow who spent a lot of his life in Alabama. He wound up founding Tuskegee, Tuskegee University now, Booker, Washington. He was a great man because he came from nothing, but he had God-given abilities, and he had an absolute refusal to be a victim on any level. He was driven not only to be a success, but to help others be a success. And fellows like that make me feel ashamed of myself and make me want to be better as a person. I don't know about all his spiritual circumstances there, but I mean just as a person. He certainly was a man who understood that you can talk about time and chance, or you can do something about your life. And Solomon says, on a much higher level, we need to do something about our life. And so, another piece of wisdom in verse 4. Let me ask you a question or a point or something you'd like to add. In chapter 10 and verse 4, if the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. I've seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth. He sort of looks at two sides of the same coin, doesn't he? What's he talking about in this passage, fellas? What is he addressing in this passage? Well, he talks about a ruler, verse 4. But it's not the ruler that he has so much in mind here as what?
He's talking about the person that the ruler may be coming against.
The subject. That's right. So he's talking about in circumstances where you have authority to be had. Sometimes you're going to be subject to authority. Everybody is. And sometimes you're going to be the authority. And you can make messes on both sides of that equation. And so in verse 4, he says, if you are under authority and you have a disagreement with a ruler, if the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place. Maybe you've got another translation of that. What do you think you mean by that?
Mine says post, leave not your post.
Leave not your post. Yes, sir.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he's talking about if you're right, you know you're right, you stand for right.
All right, that could be. But it also could be that they have been wrong in this case, but I still, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we said what I was thinking. You may be in the wrong, and you are. You gotta take ownership of that. You stand there and listen to what the girl got to say. And you keep quiet. And it's better if you're in the wrong, and you know you're in the wrong, and he's getting on to you for that, you take that punishment.
Yeah. There's an old saying, we've all heard it about how there's usually two people in an argument, the fellow who's right and the fellow who does all the talking. That's usually the way that works. That's not a wise way to go. And in this case, the reason why I would say that you absolutely ought to stand up against the forces of evil, and that's certainly true. But here he talks about pacifying great offenses. The possibility, at least, is that you might be the one who has been stepped out of line. But the thing that you do about that is don't let your pride cause you to argue or rail or get out of line. You take it. You take the punishment. You take the chewing out. Some of you guys have been in business for years, have run businesses. I know that you just shake your head at how young people, they grow up in the average home in America, just, they cannot take criticism. They just melt, they wilt. It seems like they never heard anything. It's one of the marks of wisdom is that we grow up and we recognize sometimes, I've got a fuss in this coming to me. Sometimes I deserve it. And the best thing that I can do is just take it. Take it in the best way. You're not going to be able to shout your way out of this situation. The best thing to do is yield. Look at verse 20. Maybe it's related to this same idea. Curse not the king, no, not in thy thought. Curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. For a bird of the air will carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. A little different point, but the same idea. You're relating to somebody maybe who's a little bit higher up the food chain. And so what does he warn us in verse 20 not to do?
Don't speak evil of the king.
Yeah. Don't speak evil of the king. Not even in your bedchamber. Why not?
You may find out about it.
Those nosy little birds. Yeah. Don't you think there's some measure of figure here? The bird of the air shall carry his voice. Yes, sir.
You see something also deeper in this that, I think of Jude about people who speak evil of dignitaries. There are people, even in their thoughts, it sends them in the wrong direction. And obviously they can say things, lowly, but, it could get back. But the point of it is that they should be respectful. We should realize our place like authority. God's in charge, and then there are people over us like the king, and there are people in honorable positions. Like I think of, like dignitaries. It could be a rich person, a place of honor. And we need to have a certain respect for that. And when you don't have that, then you see some of the things going on around us today.
Just somehow we have failed to communicate to the younger generation that they don't run the world, and that you have to recognize the fact that there's a time to listen. It doesn't mean that the other guy's always right, but it does mean that we have to have some humility in ourselves to recognize our place in this picture. We're working towards something. Yes, sir.
Over in the Old Testament, in Exodus 22:28, it says, "You shall not curse God, nor curse a ruler of your people."
Yeah, right. And that was, of course, thrown back at Paul, as we remember in Acts. Yeah, the ISB in our passage back in verse 4 reads, "If your overseer gets angry at you, don't resign, because calmness pacifies great offenses." So whatever the situation, even if he's the one in the wrong, but the way you deal with it, the humility that you use, I think, is very important. There's an old maxim, it's an English proverb, not a Bible proverb, that says, least said is soonest mended. Yes, sir.
Well, you know, if anybody's got a bit of experience in the workplace can tell you, it's the, you know, the guys that are able to roll with the punches is one for mass. You know, the guys that get upset over every little thing or any little, their fault or not.
Yeah.
Any little correction or anything else, guys that just take everything personally. Even when it's not meant that way, they're the ones that wind up looking for other words.
And it's more and more common, I feel. I don't know, but I expect that's true. Good point. Yes, sir.
You know, back in the, when you said something, you had to turn around and go back and apologize to it. It's kind of like what I'm thinking of. And it's what in the olden days, they said, eat crow.
Yeah, right. Which I've done a few times. And it
Make
never
all-
tastes,
make it all.
never tastes any better. But that's better than stomping up and acting like that crow don't belong to me, you know. But better still is the idea of just having the humility, you know, to not think. Now, our overall point, Louis points out this is, you know, I'm just not lucky. You know, the guy who can't keep a job like that, he's just not lucky. That's just, no, that's not your problem. Your problem is your attitude's not right. That really affects your life more than you love to admit. Yes, sir.
Yeah, reminds me of saying it, basically, it could be the common link in all your dysfunctional relationships with you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes, sir.
You know, it's a problem in this day and age, especially, you know, with the younger generation. And they feel entitled. They haven't earned anything yet, but they feel entitled. You know, you don't have a right to yell at me. You don't have a right to tell me what to do. You haven't earned the right to otherwise. You know, you need to work your way up in the workforce. You need to earn that respect. That's your authority figures. And, you know, they've been around. They know. And it's so much entitlement. It's, you know, it's sickening to see. It really is. It's scary.
But that's why, you know, our kids, I think, are that much further down the line. You know, I think they have good parents here and they've been exposed to the scriptures. And so they don't grow up with a lot of the nonsense. They have a better understanding of themselves, who they are. They're not willing to trade God away to please somebody else. That's not the idea. But the idea is that they can take instruction. It doesn't have to be, you know, put on a velvet plate. You know, they're not going to crumble every time somebody criticizes them. They have a different view. So that's one side of it. The other side, though, is what about those who are in charge? And Solomon has some hard things to say there as well. And these are familiar words to us. While commending patience and humility, he also says to those who have authority, there's an evil which I've seen under the sun, verse 5, back in our text in chapter 10. There's an evil I've seen under the sun of error which follows or proceeds from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. You have people that you place in a high place that don't deserve it, and those who you think little of that deserve better. Misplaced trust. Don't the Proverbs talk a lot about that? You know, beginning especially in chapter 25, we see a lot of that in the Proverbs. The idea of putting people in positions of authority who are not worthy of it. You know, here's something that everybody in this room knows. It's been around very often. That it doesn't take a very big business before you realize you can't do it all. And nobody can run a country by themselves. It's just not possible. You might have the greatest fellow in the world, and we might think him king, but he can't run it all. He's going to have help. You can barely run a hot dog standing at his side without some help. You got to have help. And so your success or failure is going to depend a lot on the people you depend on. And I think we understand that to be true. And what he says here is that wherever you are, and whatever endeavor we're talking about, business or government or wherever it might be, the people you choose to help you and that you rely on will have a lot to do with your success or failure. And the people that are at the top have a lot to do with the success or failure. You know, there are times when a company can sort of get around poor leadership because somebody else is trying to fill those gaps. But in the end, I think it's going to be a telling factor. Look in verse 16 of our text. I think this goes to this point. Woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child, and thy princes eat in the morning. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season, for strength and not for drunkenness. Then he adds in verse 18, by much slothfulness the building decayeth, through idleness of the hands the house drops through. I think verse 18 can be taken independently, but it just seems to me like there's a link and a connection there with what we saw before. And what's he saying? What do you mean when he talks about woe when your child is a king? I'm sorry, when your king is a child. Get it right. Yes, sir.
I mean, you know, the way kids make decisions, though, they only think about what's right in front of them.
Yeah.
You know, they can't see, they don't really have the ability to see the long picture, so they just make reactionary and impulsive decisions, and they don't see, you know, what's gonna hurt, and it's gonna cause death.
Yes, sir.
There's that point when it says, and thy princes eat in the morning, that referring to people that are not good counsel as well, probably. To this child, maybe, like real bones, kind of source, ones he chose.
It could be, yeah, it could be. The idea of maybe the child, the king is a child, he's immature, whether he's literally a child, there are cases where, you know, literal children come, or whether he thinks like a child. You know, he's a child mentally. Child, like you said, because he just, you know, children just want this and they want it right now. They don't think about the long term. They don't think about anything else. Whatever I want, I get it. And in the same way, here's a man who eats in the morning. He's not condemning breakfast, is he? But the idea is that that's really what his day's about. Just himself and just, you know, his own selfish behavior. I got more than what he got from Brother Kirby, and then he got Brother Mike. Brother Kirby.
I think a good example of the king being useful, but not so much him, but depending on, remember, Solomon's son asked the advice of the older gentleman, and he asked the advice of the younger, and he went with what the younger said, you know, do we take the burden off the people or do we make it harder?
Yeah.
And that is foolish decision.
And just to that point right quick, in Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 4, one of the curses God will place on Israel, he said, I will give thee children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. Don't you think about that? I'm sure you do. When we see sometimes people elected, we say, how in the world did that guy get in there? Well, it may be the judgment of God. God said, you're a foolish nation. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you people to suit you. Just exactly what you deserve. Children, they may be 80 years old, but they're children who are going to rule in such a way as just to give you a noseful of what you've been asking for. Now, Brother Mike.
Yeah, just see this is associating wisdom with age. The aged would be a wise, and
Yeah.
the younger would be foolish. And it kind of reminds me of that term sophomore that you brought up in the past. Wise fool.
Right. Right.
Sopho and moron.
And that's right. Of course, it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
Saul was a lot older than David,
Right.
but that's right. But there's the association. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's right. Yes, sir.
Thinking about the comment about, in my version, it says your princes feast in the morning. Thinking about that going along with the king being a child, you know, I guess there's a time when you have a nice meal, a feast, if you will. And typically it's not in the morning before you've accomplished anything.
Exactly.
Typically you gotta take care of some business and you gotta get your affairs in order and do what you should do. And then in the evening, when everything's taken care of, then you have sort of a relaxing feast, if you will. And then contrasted that, of course, in verse 17, when it says, and your princes, and the contrast to verse 16, it says, and your princes feast at the proper time.
Exactly. That's the idea of indulgence, isn't it? What's implied. Good point. Good point. Someone else that I missed. Yes, sir.
So think about the children of Israel, you know, when they wanted a king and they were warned about not being like the nations round about them. They insisted, you know, they were told, now this is what he's gonna ask of you now, if you want king. So God said, okay.
Right.
He let them have it. So, you know, like you were going back, I still believe that God still rules in the kingdom of men, and he'll give you maybe what you want.
Yeah.
Might not be good for you, but he'll give you.
Yeah, what you asked for is right, exactly. Someone else had a thought about that. So it could be, again, this kind of ruler, may be what he has in mind here. Certainly one good example of the slothfulness that causes the house to fall in. You have the wrong kind of leadership, it's going to affect the whole thing. There's no doubt about that. Question upon further. Okay. Is it just me, or is that clock off there? I don't think it's 10 after 10, is it? It's not working. Yeah, all right. So I will, I'll just assure you by letting you know I know that. Okay. Verse 8. He that digs a pit shall fall into it. Whoso breaks the hedge, a serpent will bite him. Whoever removes stones shall be hurt therewith. He that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. Different ideas about this, but the one that seems to me to make the most sense, I'll offer it to you, is the idea of, again, somebody trying to make some moral shortcut. They are trying to take vengeance for themselves, so they dig a trap. But what happens? The trap that they set for somebody else, they fall into. We were looking at the Proverbs in our Proverbs study. By the way, I appreciate those who make time to do that, to check out the Proverbs study. It's a work in progress, not just the teacher's limitations, but me trying to deal with the technology. I said last time the sound was awful, you couldn't hear it. So we're working on that, so I appreciate your patience. Anyway, so here's the idea of digging a pit for somebody else, but you wind up in the melee that you intended for somebody else to suffer. Breaking a hedge, maybe the idea of breaking through a barrier. Sometimes even hedges are used for land barriers. You're trying to break through and either take somebody else's fruits or maybe take their land. But what happens is you wind up getting snake bitten in that situation. Removing stones can be understood in the sense of stealing somebody else's materials. You guys that have building projects, of course, Kirk is a professional builder. If you've got materials on the site, you've got to protect those materials. Somebody will come and help you out by relieving you of those things. But he says here, the fellow who does that, Providence has a way of bringing that back on him. And he that cleaves wood could be the same idea of stealing trees off somebody's property. But winds up being endangered thereby. At least that's one idea. The idea when you take moral shortcuts, we have a way sometimes of suffering. And again, the overall point, I'm just not lucky. Judge's not here, but he used to tell a story when he was a fireman in Birmingham about a guy that they knew. He was always calling for some nonsense, not a real thing. One day, he called them over, called the fire department to come out to his house. And when they got there, he said, you guys can cook. I need something to eat. Y'all cook me something. That was the call to the fire department. They talked about that for 20 years. He was a bitter guy. He was in a wheelchair. But you know how he got in a wheelchair? He was a burglar. And he was going through somebody's window, the guy shot him. And so he spent the rest of his life mad at the world about that. He never was mad at himself about that. And there are people like that, And I'm trying to break through a hedge and I get bitten by a snake and I want to blame everybody else, including the snake, But that's not really where the problem is. So Solomon says you have to be honest with yourself in that regard. Okay, and another point or two, then we'll move on to chapter 11. Now, I got plenty of time, it's just 10 after. So he says, verse 10, he said, if the iron be blunt, this is the old King James, of course, if the iron be blunt, and he do not whet the edge, then must he put more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. What do you make of that?
You try to use a dull knife?
Yeah, you can, but you won't like it. Yes, sir.
It's a work smarter, not harder kind of thing.
There you
So
go.
just make sure your tools are in proper shape. Is the most basic knowledge of tools. Like, the knowledge is you're more likely to cut yourself with a dull knife than a sharp one, because you're having to put more effort into it, and you don't have as much control.
I'm gonna put that on a chart up here. Work smarter, not harder. Solomon, 1000 BC. And he actually was repeating something that wise people knew then. That's exactly right. And I do that, and I cut myself with that dull knife, and I think, man, I'm just not lucky. That probably wasn't your problem here. Yes, sir.
Just a note, talk about the axe. Abraham Lincoln used to say, if you're gonna cut down a tree, step 1, sharpen your axe. Step 2, sharpen your axe. Step 3, all the way through step 7, sharpen your axe, and the next 3, cut down the tree.
Very good point. Wisdom so dictates. The next verse, the King James reads, surely the serpent will bite without enchantment, and a babbler is no better. That's probably a little bit misleading. And the fellows here have another translation of that passage.
If the serpent bites before being charmed, there is no profit for the charmer.
Yeah. I think that the babbler and the enchanter, same guy here. The word babbler there, in fact, I think literally means the Lord of the tongue. And so he's saying here, here's a man who has the ability to be able to charm the snake in whatever way we might think of that. I don't think he's here talking about magic, but there's an idea of being able to use movements to distract. You've seen those fellows over in India, maybe video of those guys who work with those snakes and are able to do that. And the point's been made, it's not that the snake is so, they've got a little flute out there they're charming a snake with. They tell me, at least, it's not the music that does it, but it's the movement and so on. They know how to distract, hypnotize in a way this beast and to protect themselves in that regard. Yes, sir?
Snakes are deaf anyway, they don't hear.
Yeah, I tried to tell one that, but he wouldn't listen. Yeah.
Not have chocolate,
That's right. Here's the idea of a man, a serpent will bite without enchantment. He will. Don't worry. I know how to charm a snake. Yeah, but if you don't, you're going to get bitten anyway. That's the idea, I think, of the passage. So what's the lesson learned there?
Don't play with snakes.
That one I actually didn't need to read Ecclesiastes for. But that's right. But what's the lesson here? Yes, sir.
Think about it in the way of charming snakes, and people, they talk a lot, they with soothing words and everything else, kind of useless if the person ain't listening.
All right. Let me read. This is the contemporary English version, which is a paraphrase. The power to charm a snake does you no good if it bites you anyway. And I think the point there is, I wonder how many cars are stolen every day in America that were unlocked. I don't think they sell cars without locks. You might have an old cut-down car, the lock's broken. But every car's got a lock. By the way, it probably doesn't take your car thief very long to get through my lock. But it sure is useless to have a lock and not use it. And so in life, how many things have we suffered from and suffered with that really we knew better? We knew better. Well, we didn't put to use the knowledge that we had, and the result is we suffer. I think this statement, this proverb about snake charming, is intended to teach me this lesson. Put to use the knowledge you have. What good is it to you? You may know how to charm a snake, but if you don't use the enchantment it bites you, you go better off than the guy who didn't know anything about it. So that's a good lesson for our young folks. It's not enough just to know what's right. You've got to put into practice what's right. And if you apply wisdom, that's where you'll find the blessing, not just in knowing, but in following through. Yes.
And it's a lesson kind of teach, if you're told not to do something, The best way is to make sure that, is to remove all possibilities that you'll get even close to it, you know? You think about, Brian, don't touch that, and they're messing around close to it, and maybe something hot ain't burning. Why were you messing around right next to it to begin with? Why didn't you put a few feet between you and it? You know, why didn't you take extra precaution because you know the danger is there?
Yeah.
And that's that kind of thing. If you got that knowledge that, hey, this is bad, it's not enough just to know that it's bad. You got to do something about it.
Right, put it into practice. Good. There's one more verse I think in this passage that we haven't gotten to yet, and that's verse 19. We've covered the rest of them, at least some out of order. But verse 19, here's another proverb. A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. You know, I guess you could read that and get all kind of wrong ideas from it. I like some of the Modern Speech translations read, people enjoy eating and wine makes life happier, but money solves a lot of problems. Feast are for laughter and wine makes life pleasant, and money speaks to everything. Mr. Knox writes, food will cheer you and wine will bring gladness, but money, it answers every need. I don't think he's encouraging here drunkenness, that's not the idea. But I do believe what he's saying is this, you know, you can find joy in this life. There are times of pleasure, there are times of recreation, and there are times of relaxation. But a wise man will always remember that there's a value that can't be replaced in earning. And it's a mark of maturity, let's put it this way. When a person realizes and gets as much joy out of earning money as he does out of spending it. Because he recognizes the fact that money has a use. And you know, again, young people that grow up without direction and all they know how to do is consume. But wisdom, and if you grow up and you become an adult like that, guess what? Your life's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard life. And you know what? The guy, 9 times out of 9 nearly, is going to say when you ask him about things, I'm just not lucky. I just haven't had a chance. Life's against me. And what Solomon will say is, no, really, you can trace back your problems to the fact that you don't prioritize as you should. You don't realize there's a time to have a good time, but you're going to need money for some things. And you're going to have to plan that way and work toward that. And that simple principle is lost in a lot of the world, but it is a very important principle. Yes?
I think the biggest problem that we do is we haven't put that idea into our head. I'm okay right now. You know? Well, I'm okay right now. I can move it as everything else instead of as part of the money like that. I put myself ahead by making sure that I've got, you know, enough money to fix the car breaks, enough money to fix something that breaks, and then I go buy stuff.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what day you buy the big screen TV and then you don't have enough money to fix the car, and then what? You can't afford the cable to watch anything on TV either, you know?
Yeah, that's it.
There's a lot of people like that.
Illustration.
They just get the wrong things in priority.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got to have this, but you know, if you didn't have to have that, you can get yourself a whole lot better off. If you, you know, I want to go out and I want to do this as soon as I can. If you have the chance to really, if you're in a favorable spot that allows you to put back money, instead of jumping to a spot where, you know, where you're a little bit more out on your own, you know, kids, when you're old enough, instead of just jumping at the first chance to get out of the house, you know, maybe before anybody's ready to, just take the time to make sure you're ready and make sure you're good and you know, you're prepared mentally and monetarily and all of that. I'm pretty sure, you know, my dad used to say in both the 1890 law, 90 days after I turned 18, I'd ever be out. It's a joke, but I'm pretty sure, you know, as long as you're working towards making sure that you're ready, your parents aren't going to get super impatient when you leave. Especially not your last one.
Yeah. Yes,
Or you can say, you don't wanna overvalue money, but you want to respect it, and you wanna realize it's like a tool that can fix a lot of things.
That's what he said, money is a defense, said that chap, said, yes, sir. Thought of one of the ones, okay. It's gonna leave us one class left in this study, chapters 11 and 12. If you have a question about those chapters, I want you to feel free to ask it. And we'll try to cover this last section here, and wind up our